Vincent.
This is our Ron Wheeler, and he is one of the authors of this special problem.
Right. Dave and I are colleagues in crime, and we're the head of the special topic. Used to coach Wheeler, now Fay and Newper coach Wheeler. So I don't talk to the Wheeler teams, especially about the special topic. But Dave has put together the scenario, which you can read and understand that there's no way you could cover all of those topics in 10 minutes for your oral presentation. But he's given you a wonderful smorgasbord to consider. Later on, Peter will come back and tell you when you can visit Snake Den Farm to kind of scope it out, get a foot feel for it on the ground. There's some special days in that, like Arbor Day and the day after Arbor Day during most of your spring breaks, that the farm is especially active. It's going through a process now of getting new managers, and there's been nothing done, so all of your plans might be used in the future. If you have good ideas, I'm sure they'll use them. There'll be a fantastic slate of judges for the oral presentation, which is half the special topic score, 100 points, and then the other half of the special topic score is a written exam. And as Dave said, half of the questions will come from the presentations this morning, at least half, and then the other half off the resources that are on the Rhode Island Envirothon website on the special topic. You'll notice that Georgia, where we were going to go before they canceled, had put out some generic sources that cover all sustainable ag, no matter where you are in Canada and the United States, and some specific ones to Georgia. We're going to use the 5 generic ones, starting with the big one on sustainable ag and ending up with a very specific one on beekeeping, on pollinators and ecosystem services you can get on a farm. So what kind of farm you design, how you design it, what your economic plan and marketing plan is for getting food out to local people, so we can satisfy the second part of the issue, which is local foods, and reduce our carbon footprint on transportation, and have fresher foods, is all part of this special topic. We'll try to give you a break halfway through. If you get tired and sleepy and fall over sideways in your chair, there is caffeine over here. There's also local cran grape, both raised here in New England. And there is wonderful home baked goods from Janet and my own oven. And I think that's the only logistics we need. The bathrooms are out in the hall here. And our first speaker.
Yeah, we're going to run a very informal session. If you need to pee, or you just want to stand up and stretch, or you want a bite to eat or something, just get up. We keep it a bit informal while we're in here. Right. But the key idea is, remember this, you want to convince the judges that your team should be given the farm to work for a farm.
For their oral presentation. Right. So be thinking about that, filtering everything you hear today is like, how's that going to fit into my plan? And then, of course, be thinking about what diabolic questions we'd make up.
The decision makers on who's going to be managing the farm.
It's very real life as
right. So we have 5 speakers, 2 fairly short ones and 3 longer ones. And to start us off, so Eric Butker is from the NRCS office, a USD office in Quaker Lane, Warwick. There you go. And he's giving you his PowerPoint you can take notes on, and he's going to mic up, and away we go.
I'm going to do a little tag team here because I've brought my boss with me, Chris Modisette. He's not only a forester, but he's a state resource conservationist. I'm a resource conservationist, and what we do is we go out on the land, we take a look at the different resources, soil, water, plants, and animals, and we see if there's any negative impacts that are happening to those, and we try to fix those problems.
Well, anyways, good morning. As Eric mentioned, my name is Chris Modisette, and I'm the State Resource Conservationist for NRCS in Rhode Island. And just a little bit, Eric mentioned that, what we do. NRCS is an agency within the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We are the largest agency in the government that works with private landowners. We work with private landowners that are involved in agriculture and forestry, and we're strictly a sort of non-regulatory agency where we work with those landowners to try to improve the conservation practices on their land. So today we're going to talk about we're going to go back and forth. Eric does a lot with agronomy, and I do a lot with forestry. So the objective of our short presentation today is to introduce you to some of the principles of sustainable agriculture, talk about farm plan resources, the resources available to you as you're working with trying to identify what you're going to use the snake den farm for. We encourage all our landowners to develop these conservation plans, that identify resource concerns and options for use of their property before they start farming. All right, and then we're also going to talk about how we can integrate some of those resources that Eric's going to talk about into this planning process. So ultimately, what we're looking at here when we're talking about sustainability, whether it's from an agronomy standpoint or a forestry, we use natural resources to produce goods and services. The goods could be a crop or it could be timber. The services could be clean water, wildlife habitat, clean air, those types of things. But ultimately, the key is how do we balance the ability to manage those resources and keep them sustainable, but also at the same time generating revenue to support the farm. This is the definition of sustainable agriculture from your problem. And I think you can probably read it just as well as I can, but a farm must generate enough revenue to maintain it over the long term. Sustainable farms use energy efficiently. They help to sustain and improve things like plant health, water quality, air quality, soils. They minimize soil erosion, and they also minimize petrochemical inputs. So I think what I'm going to do is we're going to go back and forth here a little bit, but I'm going to have Eric talk about a few of the farm plan resources that we have available to us.
So I think we started on here. We're going to provide you with a lot of resources. I think that's important because we've got about a semester's worth of information here that we're trying to give you in about 45 minutes. So what we're trying to do here is we're going to give you some resources so that on your own time you can go and utilize those to come up with a very good plan. So one of the really great resources is the Web Soil Survey. I don't know if anybody has ever used it, but it's great for mapping, great for reporting on soils, just to learn a little different attributes about the soils that you're working on. Very, very good resource. Weather conditions, if you're a farmer, you really depend on the weather. We can't control the weather, so we need to know what the weather's going to be for cropping systems, probably for forestry, and other activities. So weather's very important. This is a fairly new weather site, the extreme precipitation in New York and New England, that's coming out of Cornell, and there's a lot of good information on there. You can download GIS information from there as well. And there's a whole bunch of other online documents that are available to you. I provided a sheet of different resources that anywhere from GIS stuff to agronomy manuals and stuff. So make sure you utilize all that because you're going to use it in your plan. It will be helpful. GIS. I don't know how much GIS experience you have, but GIS can be anywhere from just making a nice little map that looks good to actually going behind there and utilizing that data to do different interpretations. Web Soil Survey, that's what you're finding on that. You're finding the different soils interpretations that are on the soils, and they do that through different methods and a whole different slew of information. You were provided through this Google Drive, you were provided GIS data on Snake Den, and it's about 4 gigs, I think. So there's a lot of information on there. You've got soils information, you've got wetlands information, rivers, streams, slew of information. So also available, this is a great resource. Esri has put out an ArcGIS online, so you can actually go on ArcGIS. Just Google ArcGIS online. Go there. You can do interactive mapping on there, bringing in all sorts of layers from all over the world. If you Google, if you do a search on Rhode Island data, it'll bring up the Rhode Island data that's available to you. There's a lot of information up there. I've put out a lot of information from our NRCS agency. EPA, this is another really good one. So if we're looking for impaired waters, this is a great resource here is My Waters Mapper, so that you can not only go on there to find out if the water is impaired, but it will also bring you to a link for the TMDL, which is the report on what's wrong with the water and how they plan to clean it up. Very good resource. This I thought you guys provided me a great definition for sustainable agriculture. And oftentimes we're told that we don't really understand what our conservation practices are. So I created a little spreadsheet for you so that you could actually do, I call this a crosswalk. So we're taking the definition, which is along the top, and our farming practices that are on the column on the left. And then what you can do is you can just filter those, depending on what definition you're looking for, to come up with different farming practices that will help you for that part of the definition. So I hope you find that helpful. So part of this, too, was from the proposal from Snake Den. All right? So there's two important things that I found out of that was to assess the natural resources. So you're going to use your assessment. Most of the times that's done through GIS data, but don't always rely on that GIS data. Make sure you visit the field that you're going to. You're going to find out a lot of information there. You're going to confirm the information that you're finding on GIS as well. Okay? And then you're going to take that information and then you're going to integrate that into a system of conservation, okay, utilizing those farming practices, those conservation practices. So we're going to start the assessment of of the resources with soils. What kind of information do you need? You need types of what type of soil, the soil class. So soil class is prime or important soils. Those are going to be your best farming soils. All right. Land capability classification. That's a classification system that we use to show if there's what the capabilities are. So 1 through 3 are going to be your best soils for farming. Hydric soils, slope, seasonal high water table. Why is that important? Well, if you're farming, you want to know where that water is, and at times it's going to be high. It's going to make the fields moist, so that may interrupt your planting schedule. So you might need to schedule around that. And then woodland suitability, you know? You want to touch base on that one a little bit, or?
Crosswalk here. A lot of what you're going to hear, Eric, when you talk about farming, when we think about farming, we think about traditional commodity crops. We think about things like corn or vegetables and things like that around here, non-commodity crops like hay. But everything that Eric's talking about for you here also applies to that portion of the farm that might be in woodland. Oftentimes the woodland portion of a farm is ignored because of the daily pressures of working with, with cropping systems and that type of thing. So all of this process also applies if, let's say, I think Snake Den has how many acres of woodland associated with it, Paul? So as part of the farm, there may be 70 or 80 acres of woodland available to integrate into your conservation system. So everything we're talking about here also applies that to woodlands. And when you look in the type of soils, if you go into Web Soil Survey or any soil survey guide, one of the tables they have is woodland suitability classes for individual soil types. So you can look at that and it'll tell you which tree is the most productive on that particular site. So if you're trying to plant for sugar maple on a high and dry site, it will tell you, I don't think so. But if you're thinking about growing white pine there, it might say, well, that's a more suitable tree. So you can also find that type of information.